Hey guys, how's it going? What are we at? The ninth? I don't know where we're at now. Something like that. Ah! Whoops. There we go. So, just put a post off on the just an update to the where RTS goes from here thread over on the Railroad Transportation Simulator.wikia.com forum. And I won't go into details. It just basically explains, what's happening here. I'm watching Scott Hump over on Smiley's server. Smiley is here. He's running a train somewhere. Where's Smiley? Let's see if we can find him. Transport to selected player. He might be switching. Oh, this looks like the same place Scott was last night. There he is. Finishing off his job by the looks of it. Or maybe doing more. I don't know. Transport to selected player. Go back over to the hump here. Yeah, it's a good backdrop for now. So, yeah, I think Scott was saying he's waiting for a car so he can leave or something. So I think he's looking for a particular car to complete his job so that he can run a job or something like that. And I jokingly said to Scott, I said, you're not getting the itch, are you? Because he hasn't had that much interest at all in Run8, but it's kind of funny because every time I'm around 9 o'clock or whatever, my son just went upstairs, so I was actually playing, I found the digital audio music stream that I like listening to when I'm doing American Truck Simulator, which is 181 FM. And I found it on the web, so I was like, oh, okay, cool. I can listen to it on the web. Of course, I can't play it right now because I have copyright issues when doing a live stream. But so I was opening that up, and I was going to get into the RTS. Actually, thinking about getting into the RTS software tonight, but again, I have time on my hands, but I don't have too much time on my hands. Not yet, anyways. So I'm still in a phase where I want to be pretty certain I know what the hell I'm doing, and honestly, I'm not. Which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I've been diving into all things. A lot, as I said yesterday, a lot has changed in what's going on in my life, which has a lot of things are changing, actually. Not only is that changing, but I'm noticing, obviously I'm getting older. That doesn't, that everybody's getting older, so time doesn't stop. I'm about 2.5 weeks away from going on a vacation where I'm going to be rail fanning quite a bit. So I'm looking forward to it. This was supposed to have been my last day of vacation today. It would have been my last day of vacation. I would have had to gone back tomorrow. And I canceled that vacation. Last week I had a very strange vacation schedule because I had Canada Day off on the Monday. Then I still took 1 day of vacation for July 4th because it's dead. Honestly, the last 2 days have been dead, but it's going to get busy for parts tomorrow, which means I got a little bit more lifting. And honestly, I'm glad I haven't had much lifting because I noticed my physical strength is not what it once was. And I didn't notice that. I kind of noticed it recently, but I didn't pay enough attention to it. And I've discovered that suddenly, at the age of 47, I am having I don't know if it's more difficulty of lifting certain weights. It's not getting sore, but it's just I don't have the strength that I once had. And I never noticed that until probably today. I kind of noticed it before, and I'm just like, whoa, I'm lifting certain boxes. I'm like, it seems like it's taking me a lot more effort to lift certain boxes now. And I'm thinking, and I mean, we're talking heavy stuff. We're not talking light. Light stuff's no problem. So I gotta pay attention to that, because there's a possibility I'm not getting enough protein in my diet, or I don't know what exactly, because I am losing weight too. So I gotta be careful with what I'm doing. So I don't know. I might add a little bit of protein to my diet and see what happens, or I'm just getting older. Who knows? I have no idea. But I feel relatively fine. It's certainly a relief that my son's doing better, and it's changed my outlook on a lot of different things. So it was kind of weird. I had some comments on YouTube, which was really cool. I'm glad I'm getting them. It's nice. It's nice to see some feedback. I posted on the forum tonight as well, just to see if there's any feedback there. Overall, the opinion that I have got from basically, well, Scott and I were chatting a little bit last night, is that the Run8 community seems to be, you have the diehards, or I don't want to say the suck-ups. I don't want to go that far. I mean, there are diehards and there are suck-ups. There's two different, you can be a diehard and not be a suck-up. I'm not trying to relate anybody who is diehard supportive of Run8 as a suck-up. But there's also the suck-up class, like I call them. And I guess the suck-ups are still fairly strong. The diehards, I don't know if I'd say the suck-ups are that strong. I think they've died off a little bit too. And then, but there's also new blood into Run8 too, apparently, from what I'm hearing. So that's cool. There's a lot of people who, I'm not too sure if it's they're from the Spanish community, or I don't know where they're from. The English is not either their main language or something like that, who have been following Run8 and have been really getting into it, which is cool. I mean, I'm glad it's going outside of North America. It's obviously I'm on a server that is running out of Australia, so Smiley's running this from Australia right now, which is kind of ironic because he's running a server that represents a location that's very, very close to me on this planet. It's probably only a couple hours away drive from me here, even though I'm in Canada. It's just across the border in Buffalo, New York, and you follow the line to Selkirk. It's probably about 3 hours at least to get to Selkirk, but I've never been to Selkirk itself. I've been to Syracuse, and I've been to Albany, but it's more than 3 hours. It's probably a little bit more than that, but it's kind of weird. Western New York, and that's not even Western New York, because that's Eastern New York. So no, it's probably about 8 hours. Now that I think about it, but still, it's fairly close to me. It's a day trip. It's a very long day trip or an overnight trip, but I'm 6 hours away from Fostoria, Ohio too. So New York State is, I go to New York State every day, or I shouldn't say every day, every weekday that I'm working. So I'm familiar with New York State. You would think, but I'm more familiar with more Western New York than I am Eastern New York. So I know I would say the Buffalo, Niagara Falls area of Western New York. Once you get outside of that, then my familiarity it's just because if you're not, I'm more familiar with Fostoria, Ohio, and than I am 90, I would say 90 some odd percent of the state of New York. Whereas the province of Ontario, where I live, I'm familiar, I would say, with most major centers for sure, but some of the rural centers, I'm certainly familiar with the rail lines. I would say 80% of the rail lines I'm familiar with. Most of the major ones for sure. And I shouldn't say it, Southern Ontario. Let me distinguish that, because Ontario is a huge province, the size of it's over the size of Texas, I believe, in overall size, if I'm not mistaken. But it's big. Provinces are a little bit bigger than states for the most part. Most part, not all, but anyways. So I don't know how the hell I got on that little tidbit of stuff, but so I think if anything's getting an itch, or why am I focused more on this than I actually, like I said, I ran the truck simulator, American Truck Simulator, last night for a little bit, and right away it was just like, okay, I play actually for 2 hours tonight. I was just playing video games with my son. We were playing this game called Ark. I don't play it by myself. I play it only with him, and we have fun doing it. So he guides me around because I haven't got a clue what I'm doing half the time. And sometimes I'll make decisions that he may not approve of, like taking risks and stuff like that. But ultimately, it's my game to play. But he is my guide, and that's how we play video games. He usually will sit on the couch and he will guide me and advise me, whether it's a game that he knows more about, or perhaps I know more about, or we both know somewhat about. He's not interested in a game like Run8. And yeah, I'm certainly relaxing right now, for sure, Smiley. So it's very, this is a lot more relaxing than Truck Simulator. As much as I enjoy Truck Simulator, what happened there was, a lot of times, I think on the weekend when my son was bogged down and we weren't getting out places, we didn't play video games the whole time. A lot of times we would, but there was times where we would just go through YouTube, or we would just, we'd be watching different things, and I'd be looking forward to getting into games that I liked. So games I liked, or at least were into, such as American Truck Simulator and Stormworks, are the two more recent ones. And I noticed as early as about a month ago, they were still the top two interests that I had. Stormworks I haven't run in since about that time, and American Truck Simulator, obviously I ran it last night, but before that I hadn't ran it for a good week or two. Run8, this is the second night in a row that I've opened up Run8. Now, does that mean I'm into Run8? Not yet. What I'm always going to be into, though, is trains. Trains, in general, is something that I can't deny. Now, I've been in the model railroading. I was able to leave that behind. I was never into model railroading. I was into operating. So operating and actually being into crafting a part of the hobby is totally different. What I really liked and enjoyed was being a member of a model railroad club. I kind of left that for two reasons. At least two major reasons. The club that I belonged to was an hour and a half away. So it was an hour and a half there, hour and a half back. But the good thing was their sessions were like events. My son enjoyed that club too. And there's always the possibility down the road that we might be able to go back. I mean, we left on good terms. I'm still watching, keeping an eye on their progress, and we certainly go and visit when we have an opportunity to. But the whole thing about what I liked about it, suck-ups love it. Suck-ups love what? Run8? But suck-ups love Run8. Oh my god. Did I hear a train? I thought I heard something. Oh no, I'm hearing stuff upstairs. Never mind. I thought I heard dynamics. I was like, what the hell? Just water running upstairs. So, no, for me, it's since I've been working for over 3 years where I work, and I have always tried to purposely get stuck by a train while I'm working, because I drive over the main line that goes through my town or city, the Grimsby sub, and the Grimsby sub connection with the Stamford sub is in Niagara Falls. So what's cool about that is usually the mornings are fairly busy, at least for our standards. There's at least one passenger, the Maple Leaf, headed to the States. Sometimes I see him in the States, actually. If I'm really behind, I'll see him in the States. I'll see him crossing the international border. But most times I see him, if I'm running on time or running just maybe about 10 or 15 minutes off pace. That might happen tomorrow because I got a heavy load to deal with. I may see the Maple Leaf in Niagara Falls. Generally speaking, I don't always see him. I would say I see him maybe once every, I don't know, maybe once or twice a month. I would say I see him. But then again, now that I've been out and about, I see him both ways sometimes, a little bit more now, because I'm rail fanning again, getting to get out more with my son, and that has helped. But the other trains, 421, 422, 331, with the exception of 330, which runs tonight, usually goes through Niagara from Sarnia around this time. By the way, the tunnel has reopened from what I've heard, so I was talking about detours. So all those detours that are running through our area has stopped, which is kind of bad news because it means our traffic levels will go back down a little bit. But the good news about that is now Brantford should get back to normal. So we had a pretty slow, it was kind of weird on the weekend. I think crews were way overburdened, running law over the damn place and not having enough crews because of all the detours all over the place. But yeah, so the detours should be coming to an end if they haven't already. The first train went through from what was scheduled to have gone through this evening, the tunnel. Yeah, I've always, because there's 3 freights and 1 passenger that could be running through Niagara in the mornings. No, I don't drive purposely to the tracks by work. It's not I don't cross the tracks. I shouldn't say that. If one road was open right now and there wasn't construction on the Queen Elizabeth Way, I would be crossing the tracks, but I normally don't see a train on those tracks at that time. It usually a little bit too early. When I start seeing a train is when I come into work. I pass over an overpass. Sometimes I see him, sometimes I see the back of him. But where I usually like to see him is a grade crossing on the way to the States at Clifton Junction. And I could see one. Sometimes I see two there if I time it right. But or I just see part of one, or I would say 70 to 80% of the time I don't see a train. I just don't. I just happen to be there at the right time, wrong time, whatever, and it changes, and I don't see anything. And which is okay because I'm still seeing a lot of trains lately anyways. So that, despite the fact that I've always tried to see the trains, I didn't always get my chance. Now I don't have to worry about it because now I can go out and rail fan on a weekend or a weeknight or wherever else I want to do, because now things have changed with my personal life and my son and all that other stuff, because his health is getting better. And I think that has made me realize I can, and I think somebody made a bet or something, and I don't know how long he said it was going to take. But here's the thing, I'm not into Run8 yet. I'm contemplating it. I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to get into it. Because I can tell you right now, here's a perfect example. I'm looking over... Cat's watching the cars roll off the hump. So... yeah, Emmett's cats too would probably be doing the same thing. It's kind of funny, because I got a big screen downstairs, and I'd be moving the mouse around. The other day I was teasing it, and the cats come down to visit Emmett on the weekends when Jackie comes down to visit my son for a little bit, which is something she's got the luxury of doing, and I have the luxury of doing during the week. Like tomorrow night, for example. Wednesdays, typically, I would not see him. Well, I'm seeing him tomorrow because Jackie's going out and needs somebody to watch him. So, not a problem. I'm here to do that. Yes, not a problem. We get to go do a few other things, so that's fine. Not sure what we're doing. I don't know if I want to play video games again tomorrow night, but we'll see. So, looking at my view here from Selkirk, though, I can tell you this. At first glance, if you were to look at this from a rail fan's perspective, you might say 10, 15, 20 minutes. There's times where trains are just not rolling around. You might look at this and say, okay, well, this is realistic. But at the same time, if you were here for 2 hours and Scott's done for the evening and the hump shuts down because he's got his train and he's leaving, then does it become realistic or not? Probably not. And the majority of time 24/7 is up. It's probably not. It's certainly not realistic. And when I look at how some of the other servers operate, and it's not a criticism of the servers are doing the best they can. So you have some servers that like to, just basically please everybody. They just want, hey, do what you want, blah, blah, blah. And, they'll have dispatchers available, they'll have, it'll be popular, everything, is whatever, and it may be popular, it may not be. They might have groups of friends over, and everything will be cool, and yeah, that's great and all. Just because a server has people to run on it doesn't make it realistic either. Just because trains are running by each other doesn't make it realistic. What Run8's always been capable of, and has had the potential of, is being the most realistic train simulator on the planet. And although I've always said it's not the best railroad simulator, that one still goes in my mind to Freight Yard Manager. I've tried my best to have RTS, or at least that was the goal of RTS, to bridge that gap with Freight Yard Manager and allow Run8 to have the best train simulator on the planet, where I would become the best railroad simulator. So I would bring in the traffic. I would bring in the processes. I would bring in whatever else is going on, and Run8 can stick to being the best train simulator that it's capable of being. I know Scott had mentioned too. He said, it's too bad that we wouldn't have access to the inner somehow to be able to mod or do different things. And the problem with that is, of course, you're starting to get into the potential revenue streams if you get into that, because now you're possibly getting into modifying their what they can do for add-ons, and that's their bread and butter right now. So I understand perfectly well why version 1 and version 2 was a big difference between what could be modded and can't be. And version 1, a lot of the files were open. Version 2, the only file that is open, and ironically enough, from what I hear and what I've been told, was for the benefit of RTS. I haven't probably been a good cheerleader for Run8 for some time. Nor have I ever been. I've always tried to be critical when it deserved to be critical. I've always tried to be true to my audience and true to my members. So in other words, if something's going on with Run8 and I don't think it's going in the right direction, I will speak out against it. And perhaps that's earned me a bad reputation with all the suck-ups. Perhaps that's earned me a bad reputation with the Run8 team. Obviously, if you've been knocked out of the beta team twice, you must be doing something they don't like. But, we clash and all that other stuff, but I don't know of too many people who have supported Run8 before day one. Now, just because I certainly haven't done much with it lately, but I'm still trying. I'm still trying to find, give me something to go on here. And unfortunately, they're giving some things. They certainly, there's things that are coming. Like the last update was a pretty good one. The addition of new endpoints was very good, but still, there's a lot of things that I think need to be improved, mainly AI dispatching and AI ability to switch. So whether it be single player, AI was a tremendous improvement from version 1, because what that did was that allowed finally for people to be able to move the trains. Having some car control system embedded was also an improvement. Even with RTS in place of version 1, having the ability for cars to sit at industries and automatically tag themselves and stuff like that. And yeah, even their waybill, their waybill generation, and I'm not a big fan of their randomness. I never have been. They don't do it right personally, but that's just my programming side seeing issues, and they've never seen an issue with it. They just go with it. I'd love to see schedules. It's not a big deal for me anymore because, quite frankly, I've gotten to the point where I find that the servers have gotten way too big. And that's because there's constant expansion. That's how they make their money. That. I wish they would expand in a different way, and that is, let's get the smaller regions going. If they had one small region, I don't care what it is. Honestly, it doesn't matter to me what it is. Give me one small region. Give me, I don't know, something that is its own world, that has maybe some really cool looking scenery in it. Some really cool looking assets that are unique to it. And I'm not too sure. I mean, what have we had? Maybe something in the Northwest. Maybe perhaps something in Canada. I don't know. But something that would allow an opportunity to work on a smaller scale and not necessarily be in a rush to expand. When you look at the two other regions other than California, you're looking at Selkirk Mohawk, which I haven't heard too much from Mikey these days. I don't know if how much he's into it anymore. It's probably not gotten as much traction as the other regions have. It's easily the third most popular route. But I've always said, you look around the scenery and the way the trees are planted and how, everything here, to me, and I don't get me wrong, I know Florida's got a lot of trees and all that stuff too, but there's places, and this isn't a good example. You go down the line a good 20 miles that way, and you start seeing scenery that really puts into depth with the trees and the hills. It looks so much so scenic and so New York State like, and that meant a lot to me to see the Mohawk River, to see the canal system. And no, he doesn't have his own assets. He's using assets from other routes. But this is the most beautiful route, in my opinion, of all three. It's a shame that not so much that the talent of the developer. I mean, yeah, there's some bug. I think there's bugs in this yard still, as far as I know. But if you put big cars in this yard, they have issues. But that's common in other yards too, like even the Big Bull in Waycross, I think, has that issue. But if you go into what was I saying? Okay, yeah. So bugs aside or whatever, this is a region that I did hear one time talk about development. I think Mikey had mentioned one time thinking about heading closer towards Buffalo. And there was even one time where I kind of dodged it, was thinking, well, gee, if you do that, maybe somehow I could find a way to do my region. And I can't get into certain things, actually, now that I talk about it. I'm going to get myself into trouble here. So I won't get into myself into trouble, but let's just say having a region in my area would be kind of nice, because I don't know much about I don't have too much experience of developing routes or assets or graphics and all of that and artistry and all that other stuff. But I certainly I would love to take the time to get something together and do something. I think that'd be really cool, which is kind of why I was kind of hoping the route editor was going to be available, but that it didn't. And apparently it was never on the table. Some kind of editors was talked about, I know that, but I don't know, or tools or something, but John had corrected me. But then again, maybe I heard something differently. Maybe we, both, maybe he said something and it was taken the wrong way. I don't know, but whatever. It was kiboshed very quickly. Root editors are not on the. They're something that you're not going to see in Run8. As far as John is concerned, he does not want to see that. He's totally against seeing any kind of root editor. So that's basically where it goes. That's right on TrainSim. Got what? 4 more cars. I was wondering where it was going. But yeah. So having said that, a smaller region would be much more appealing to me, because then you can have a smaller group and you can have an on-demand. The problem with say for example, I haven't bought into doing stuff on this server yet. And the reason being is because there's so much available. I mean, I know there's 2 maps full. And yeah, you can stick to one region. The problem is 3 people enough to even support a region or make it worthwhile to feel small? Because it'll never feel small to me. When, and Scott was saying the other day, oh yeah, I'd like to run it on the hump and just run in the hump or something like that. And the other one is they were down the other way working on the one area and stuff like that. I don't think that's the thing when you're dealing with such a big scope. You can do anything, and that there's no parameters, and you can do anything. Well, then that's where that highlights the issue that every server faces, and that is there's too much stuff to do and not enough people to do it. Doesn't matter how many AI trains you have. Somebody has to work the hump, somebody has to work the yards in order to get those cars flowing to and from the industries. They just have to be done. If they're not done, then trains don't move. I mean, I think Scott was saying you needed 1 car or something out of there, so that's why I believe he started running the hump. So he's basically, if I understand what Scott's talking about, he needed 1 car to finish up one of these trains, I think. Let's just say, even if I'm wrong on that, let's just say he needed that. So he needed the hump to get done in order for that to happen. So he's been being the hump operator. He'll get his train, he'll become the dispatcher, which is not a big deal when there's not enough to dispatch anyways, because you can just line yourself up and do whatever. That's not a big deal. But then he's running the train down or whatever. And let's say, for example, it's a local operation. Let's say, for example, it's not even the train that's going to depart from Selkirk. Let's say it's going to be transferred to a short line, and you're interested in the short line. Well, you need all 3 of those things to happen in order for that train to get those cars. You need the hump to continue to operate. You need, not only do you need the hump, but it networks out. So the hump becomes the central portion, of the distribution. But you need all the trains to come in. You need somebody to run the trim. You need somebody to run the hump. You need the blocking. You need everything. At least up to that point needs to be done regardless. Then from there, you start getting into the smaller sections. Until you get to that section, you're at the hump level. You've got way too much demand to get all those trains to come in. So the hump is critical. is probably the most critical. The hump and the trim are the most critical jobs. And I remember I remember when I ran California, and I eventually gave up on running Barstow on a regular basis. I remember back the time where I used to run Barstow on a regular basis when I was on the Southwest server, and I remember how Barstow was feeling like a job to me because it was so demanding. Not so much that it was relaxing, but it was so demanding to keep Barstow going because the demands of the server and the demands for everything else that Barstow needed to get done. First of all, Barstow doesn't have enough tracks, neither does Selkirk, compared to the real world. So you're constantly playing around with the hump. Now a hump like Waycross, that's a different story. Waycross has enough tracks to do it. Problem with Waycross is when things bugger up on this end, just like I think you can access it on this end here. Waycross, for some reason, you can't access the switch tracks. I think you can here, if I recall. I think Waycross is the only one that you can't, and which is prototypical. But where's the bull here? Oh, maybe. No, actually, I don't. I guess you can't. Or are they manual? They're manual switches, right? Yeah, okay. So Waycross has the automatic switches. So they're talking about doing something to allow it. But anyways, I'm getting off topic. The point is you need the guys to bring the trains in. And yeah, you can AI a lot of those trains, but the trim and the hump is critical. One of the things I believe that's an idea that John is aware of is to have an AI hump operator. So he knows at least that part is feasible. So that'll be a huge help for some of the bigger regions. Unfortunately, there's not enough tracks. So yeah, you get the hump, and to get it to do what Scott just did there, you get that part. That part's pretty cool, but it's got to know when to stop. It's got to know when it comes up to limits. Certainly doable. It's certainly programmable. That's not a problem, but you're still going to come into a capacity issue, and I think Run8's already facing not capacity issues. Run8's actually facing resource issues, because I know the humps, at least for me, I've seen the humps not working as well, and I know there's warnings out for trying to fill too many cars into Waycross. The game engine can only handle so much, and that's the problem when you're dealing with so many cars, and and people are bitching and whining about the graphics and all this other stuff. It shouldn't have to be pretty. I mean, it's great that it is, but it doesn't have to be, So yeah, so you get to the local level. Now let's just say I want to run. Let's say, for example, I want to run what are some of these bloody short lines? It's been a while. So I want to, I like a small, say I like a short line. Now, I'm not saying I necessarily like to run a short line either, because I'm not much for switching. I'm actually a little bit higher up to that. I'm actually more of the type who wants to run a region I'm familiar with, like where there's maybe a few switchers and anywhere between half a dozen to 20 to 40 trains a day. Something smaller than anything here. But let's just say, for example, that I want to play around with I don't know, Finger Lakes Region Railroad. Here's one where these industries. I mean, even the other one. A good example is something that Scott and I he tried to simulate there. We tried to simulate was the Trona Railroad. SJVR is another example, although SJVR is more. It's too compact for me, but Trona's kind of interesting, or at least something that allows for some longer runs and a little bit of relaxation as well. That kind of short line operation is appealing to me. In St. Catharines, where I live, there's actually Port Colborne Harbor Railroad. Actually, let me show you that, and I will show you what I'm talking about. This is my region of Niagara. That's where I used to live, in that area. I don't live in that area anymore. It just thinks I am. So I live in St. Catharines, between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, North America. And it's amazing too. You look there, and you go into the. I don't know whereabouts are you here in Smiley? Whereabouts in Australia are you? I have no idea. It's amazing how far away. Yeah, we got like 200 pings, and no wonder why we're. Whoops. I know where the hell I am. Yeah, let's go back to North America. And so Scott's out in Vermont. I think I got that right. I hope I got that right, Scott. So here we are. Here's Albany, Syracuse. Like I said, New York State's a pretty wide state. This is the province of Ontario. This is how big it is. Like I said, it's bigger than the state of Texas. But I'm heading up onto a trip down to Thunder Bay area. So yeah. I thought somebody was chatting. So yeah. So getting back to the Niagara region now. This is the tunnel, the Sarnia Tunnel, that is just reopened. So that is the main traffic flow here. I was talking about that the other night. But within Niagara, there is Canadian National runs a line this way, comes through Niagara Falls. There's a border crossing here for the Amtrak Maple Leaf. There used to be a little bit of freight traffic. Canadian Pacific also runs a little bit more further south. Through Welland, and then joins back into CN's track. CN kind of comes down, comes here, and then goes that way. There's former lines that used to be there. There used to be a straight shot right across here called the Queso Sub, which basically stood for the Canada Southern. It used to be a straight shot that went right down here. It was like totally fast. So all these detours that have been happening, instead of detouring through the states, they could have actually used the Queso. And they actually using the tunnel. They were using the tunnel here, but they could easily detour that way and jump onto the Queso and save themselves some time. But that line is pretty much torn up and gone. But there's some older CN lines in the region that. Port Colborne Harbor is based out of the Welland area, and it runs a local out of Welland to St. Catharines. It runs another local to Port Colborne, and so there's a nice little run here. Normally that train there's only one train a day, and it holds it usually has anywhere between 4 to 6 cars on it usually. So it runs into St. Catharines, crosses the CN tracks. Like I said, CN maybe runs 6 to 8 trains, 6 to 8 freight trains a day, plus couple passengers, and then it runs the GO train commuters 2 a day, weekdays, and then on weekends during the summer months it runs quite a few, which gets interesting. But the whole short line that runs is the Welland Ship Canal, and basically follows through Welland on the west side of the canal for the most part. Switches some industries here in St. Catharines. There's only, I think there's only 3 industries in St. Catharines it switches. 3 or 4. So that's why there's only so many cars that go through there. I shouldn't say that. No, that's in St. Catharines. There's actually a couple industries in Thorold as well, and then the rest of it goes to Welland. Welland has a couple industries in Welland, and then a few industries in Port Colborne. So bulk of the traffic goes to Port Colborne. Canadian Pacific runs an interchange train through the tunnel. There's a rail tunnel here, runs down 58A actually. This is both a road and rail tunnel combined. So it runs a interchange to something called Southern Yard, which is out by Cook's Mills. Here's the Stamford sub right here. Here's Southern Yard. That's the old queso right there. Used to run across. But right here, you can see the lines are coming into play here. That's the old CP Hamilton sub, or what was left of it, where it used to cross Niagara Falls. Now it's called the Montrose branch. So CP has a local operation as well. Runs a train back and forth to Niagara Falls to very few industries that are left. This line's pretty much dead now, but the bottom line, this is CP's old line. CP joins up and uses it. So they join up here and start using CN's line, whereas CN comes down on the Stamford sub. That's the basic line that goes in, and then you got the Port Colborne Harbor that runs on this side. CN still runs on this side a little bit. Port Robinson Yard is the center point. It's not that many tracks. There's actually a little bit more. There's some nice chemical industries. I used to work at one of them as a programmer back in the day. So this is a nice little intermediate yard size of it's bigger than Mojave. I'd say it's not as big as Bakersfield. Maybe the size of UP Bakersfield. No, it's both between UP Bakersfield and BNSF Bakersfield for size. So it's pretty good, and I personally would love to see something where I'm running trains in and out of Niagara. If I want to run the main line, this is a nice little 30-minute run down here. You've probably seen me pop the ATCS display off here before. I'm not too sure if no, I'm not going to show it. I'll show it real quick without trying to get, because you're not supposed to show ATCS. They don't like you showing ATCS when it's live. So, but anyways, I'll show you ATCS. I'll show you just a little bit of it. I probably just could have shown the I've allowed my 3 connections to the server. I'm talking about 3 connections to the server. I don't have 3 other connections to the server. So yeah, that's this is the Grimsby sub out of Hamilton. So just running 30 miles out of there. Boom, that's it. Okay, that's all I wanted to show. Let me close that up. I don't know why it's saying I had 3 connections on the server. I do not. That's strange. Nobody else is running a computer right now, unless my son's computer's on. which he could be. He could be monitoring ATCS. He probably knows how to do it. But anyways, yeah. So there's Hamilton right there, as I saw on the map, and then it shows you all the way to Niagara Falls. That's the Grimsby sub. Then the Stamford sub begins. So I would love to have something where I would be running an operation just like that. You know, a select handful of industries, nothing major, no humps. Just give me a selection of, you know, 6 trains to run on CN, and if it ever got as busy and we wanted to expand, then you can have CP have its own line. This is why I like the idea of having an area that has more than one railroad, because then you can choose as a server, you can decide if you want to focus on both railroads, or you can focus on one, and nothing really feels out of place, because the only thing that, you know, makes them part of each other is the interchange. In this case, CN and CP pass each other by Bayview, but that's about it. So they pass right in this little area here. Other than that, there is no other interaction. Yeah, okay, technically they cross over each other too, if you want to get that, you know, there is a place where they actually do cross each other over, but, and CP uses CN's track, so yeah, it's kind of like the Mojave sub, except the Mojave sub, the majority of it is dual. So if you're gonna have, you can't run one railroad. You're forced to run BNSFs, especially, you know, anywhere on Mojave. The only place, and what was appealing to me, was being able to possibly run the Bakersfield, but I never ended up getting it. So I never bothered. Never bothered with that. So what does this get? So what can I do in this case? I can wait and hope and see what happens. I can't do an editor. I can certainly do my own simulation, or try to. I can do it in 2D. I can, you know, and say forget Run8. If I had the ambition, I would do it. If I had the time, I would do it. But I do work. I have a son. Yeah, it's not happening. It's not going to happen right now. So no. What's he doing? You got CSX. Transport to selected player. Oh. There he is. Oh, he's getting the power ready for something. But, yeah, let's go join him. Oh, he must be going backwards. Okay. We'll just follow him. So, so having a being part of a big operation like this, I mean, it's great. It's great when you have the people that can run and are willing to run, but of course, when you're looking at Selkirk, you see this big, huge section of a lot of double track. And that's the majority of it. The majority of it is all double track. You don't see the single track. And that, I think, is the reason why people don't gravitate towards Selkirk. Because they see it as, they don't see it as something where they don't see it as something that's appealing to them to operate. That's appealing to operate. So, which is probably why I think that is the number one reason why it is not as popular. It's the number one reason why, and server coverage. Obviously, Smiley's got a server here, but I mean, you guys can check out Smiley's server. I don't mind showing this. There's no passwords right now. Scott sometimes has a server there, but that's Smiley's IP address. If you got Run8, he's running 24/7. You want to run, I mean, that's his IP address. And you can go to my forum and find out more information about what he's doing and stuff like that as well. But those things, you know, are certainly out there. They're available. 1 second. Wow, this night's actually going by quick because I'm just yapping, which is okay. I don't mind that. So, what I'm trying to figure out next now is, do I have the itch, or am I just someone who likes trains and wants to try to experiment and play around and find a way? Somebody told me once that I always seem to find a way with Run8. I find a way to make it work. And you're limited to what you can do outside of Run8 itself. You can go in and you can go, like, you can, like, obviously you can spawn trains, but what is I can't even remember the keys. That's how long it's been. So when you're into trains, for example, and you can see I have, in fact, I was doing a virtual hump here because I see all these numbers. If you take a look at all those numbers, those aren't train numbers. Those are virtual humps. So what had happened was, you see the Selkirk project, and I remember doing this. It says the Selkirk project. What had happened, and I'm not too sure if I can load it or not. Let me just see if it works. I think every track is loaded right now, so Hump's not running, so I can probably get away with trying some of these. So here's what would happen. Now I can't remember how the hell to do it. Okay, so if I try 11 or 12, I've attempted to spawn the train in the world. Does that mean I actually did it? I don't want to be messing up things. So you see that loaded something in the bowl. And I think it loaded it down here, but I don't know if it did or not. Oh, okay. See, it's attempting to spawn. So you notice it went right to it. So what I had set up, I believe, was I had multiple configurations of the hump, and I was playing around. I think I was playing around with a virtual hump going on, if I recall. I can't remember how I did it, but what it did was it basically. Oh, okay, I remember how I did it. I remember exactly how I did it. So the way the virtual hump worked was, you basically, the reason why I had track numbers for everything was I had it set up. How did I have it set up now? Okay, I had it set up so that it would if it was humping, and those particular tracks weren't part of it, it would go away. Oh, I know what happened. Okay, so if there was a train that was coming from the northeast, I think I had it set up so certain bull tracks that wouldn't have stuff from not the northeast. If it came from the southeast, let's say, these tracks would not have anything to the southeast in them. They would have stuff going somewhere else, type thing. So it kind of gave it its best shot at distributing or filtering something. There's other ways, though, and that was the virtual hump, but the other ways of doing it, and if I wanted to change the bowl, not only did I have to, the old way that we used to do it, at least in the Southwest, is we would actually have to trim out the bowl and run it. We'd actually have to trim the bowl, set it up for the yard, basically empty everything out, and then set it up for doing something else. But this way would allow you to basically take every single track, save it, go one by one, save it, then delete them all, and then spawn another configuration in, and then spawn the tracks. So it actually gave you the ability to turn this hump into a much bigger prototypical hump, except it wasn't spawning all the tracks at once. This was, I don't think I did it for California, but I did it for Selkirk project, and it worked pretty good. Except Selkirk had issues up here in some of the tracks with some of the bigger cars, and eventually I gave up on it because it was such a PITA. But so that's how you can run an operation like Selkirk if you want to. There was other little things too about the way CSX does their blocking versus the way Run8 likes to block. Again, this is something where RTS could come in handy, because RTS can assign blocking versus how Run8 likes to assign its own blocking. So there's a lot of ways around it. In fact, RTS 1, the way it blocks, actually would work perfect for CSX's blocking, because you could basically have it set up so that it would keep the order that you wanted for the waybills. Now, I have a lot of other ideas beyond that. Some of the ideas include having it actually one thing I never liked the task of doing is trimming the yard. I enjoyed relaxing, running the trains. I like taking a train and running it and having meets. My ideal train run is to be able to get into a train that's realistic. I don't like to just go to point A to point B for the sake of going to point A to point B unless it has a purpose. So if it has a purpose, fine. But if it's just to see trains and relax, I get a little bored of that after a while, especially when you run the same route. Or if you don't see that many trains, to be quite honest. So the danger of having a smaller region is you don't get to see as many meets. Now, what's cool about a smaller region, though, is the trains that you do see, you know what they are. You know what purpose they stand for. Because you're running a smaller region, if you're going to meet a train, like, for example, in Niagara, if I'm 421 coming out of Toronto, and I have to hold at Clifton for 422, I know what 422 is. 422 is coming out of Port Robinson, and he's getting out of my way because he's on single track between Port Robinson and Clifton. if I happen to see him on the Grimsby sub and I pass him, I still know who he is. He's not just a random train to me. He's my sister train. If it's 331, then I know, and 331 being an odd number, it's a little bit different because it runs to Sarnia, so it goes the opposite way once it reaches Hamilton. So it's technically a westbound, but it's running. So anyways, 421 would meet 331, even though they're both odds. 331 comes out, he's headed to Sarnia. So if 421 is holding for two trains, sometimes that happens. He would be holding there for not only 422 for Toronto, but he would also be holding for 331 for Sarnia. Those trains are very identifiable. They don't just look like random manifest trains. I can take a look at those trains, and I don't need a scanner. I can tell you what those trains are just by what they're carrying, even though they're manifest trains. It's not Sarnia has a lot of liquefied petroleum on them, tank cars, whereas 421, 422 often has a lot of auto racks, and a lot of the Niagara Industries interchange with CAP stuff, pipe. There's some pipe industries in the region, so I know what they look like. So for me to see a train and meet a train, it's much more meaningful for me to meet a train than I know what that train's all about. If I'm on a transcontinental route, especially in the States, the transcontinental in the States is a lot busier than the one in Canada. If I'm on the transcontinental in the States and I see trains running by, I don't know what half of them are. Just because I see a name, okay, well I know it's from, but there's so many places, it's crazy the number of trains you see. So that's what I would like to do. I'd like to run a train like that who maybe goes into Port Robinson, doubles down, or maybe a 421, not just that would go to Port Robinson, because a lot of them terminate and start at Port Robinson. I believe, yeah. I'm just trying to remember if any of them come out of Buffalo. But let's say, for example, Hamilton or Aldershot. 421 and 422 can work one of those yards. 330, 331 often works Hamilton yard. That's okay for me because I have a head-in cars for that yard. So I have a drop, or I have a pickup, and it's there. Or if I want to, the other thing is 421 comes into Port Robinson, and let's just say if I'm only doing the Niagara portion, well, no, I'm not bothering. Let's say it's not big enough to include Hamilton, which you're starting to get into some of the Hamilton traffic past there in Aldershot. So there's, now you're dealing with 40 or 50 trains possibly. But let's just say we're still dealing with Niagara. So even 421 coming into a yard has a purpose because 421 is broken down into what's going off onto the CP interchange. It's breaking down to the local that serves the short line. It's breaking down to a train that heads out of Port Robinson that has a head-end lift for Fort Erie that interchanges with Norfolk Southern at Fort Erie, live interchange, goes on to move to Buffalo with the remainder of the cars and interchanges at Frontier Yard in Buffalo with CSX, comes back, takes whatever it has left for them, heads back, and this is usually an afternoon job, which I don't see because I don't see it in my area. I even forget the train number, to be quite honest. It's 565 or some crazy number, 531. I can't even remember the train number, but it basically is the border run for from Port Robinson to Buffalo. So, and it's a big train, and it's a fun train. Actually, that job alone would be really cool. So I have a choice, like I said, between if it's just CN, I got a choice between at least possibly running one of, I don't know, I guess it would be 7 or 8 main lines, or I have the ability to run the Port Colborne. Let's say we're gonna include Port Colborne Harbor, so we do it. Or we're gonna include CP, so we do it. CP has it's about the same number of trains, same number of industries perhaps, and Port Colborne Harbor, as I said, is interesting. You have 3 distinctive railroads now that have very little to do together. So if you have that, now all of a sudden you're not dealing with a line that has, well, you got double track main lines with nonstop trains that you can't recognize and tons of industries, which seems to be the popular thing because everybody likes to have a lot of industries to keep them busy, or else they're going to get bored, right? Less is sometimes better. And that's what I would like to see. And it's one thing taking this, I've taken it through, I tried doing Syracuse for a while and just doing that region. I tried the Selkirk project I did out of Selkirk. I didn't bother with Mohawk. I think one person followed me for a while there, but it wasn't anything to write home about. So getting back to what I can do automation wise, so I can bitch and complain about it, or I can try to do something about it. So the idea here is, if I can't, how would you say, if running a select area for myself or for my own entertainment, if I was on Mojave Sub, or let's just say, we'll use this for example. I'm not too sure if Selkirk project, I mean, don't get me wrong, I like the hump and I like running the hump once in a while. I could probably do a routine that would push the automated hump further, or the semi-automated hump, or the virtual hump. Virtual hump version 2, what it could do, if I programmed it properly, would be able to take a train that arrives in any of these receiving tracks and then processes the data, gets it into the virtual tracks, not the actual tracks, but the virtual tracks, and then the virtual tracks show up either when trimming, or the virtual tracks show up either when whenever it's needed, I guess. Whenever somebody physically wants to build a train. And if nobody wants to physically build a train, then it could be left with whatever cars that may or may not be dated. So that would work. That can be done. There's no reason why that can't be done, with the exception of, is Run8 going to allow me to spawn cars the way I want, which for straight track usually that's not a problem. This is a good test, but I don't know if I would start at the hump. I would probably start at something a little bit simpler. So when you look a little bit further, you can go with the short line, Doing the short line is one way. Um, whether it be NYSW, Finger Lakes. Yeah, there's a lot of you can do MA. There's so many different ones. Personally, like I said, for me personally, I wouldn't want to do a short line because a short line for me is just a switching nightmare. That's why I never really got into SJVR, because SJVR to me seemed like it didn't seem relaxing enough for me. I was like, okay, no, I don't want to be switching all the damn time. Do I want to run a hump every now and then? Well, yeah, I could do that. So maybe, possibly, I could do that. But I would like to just take, Selkirk's a tough one because, like I said, it's double track, which isn't the end of the world, especially if you're not going to see that many trains. It's just kind of weird running double track and not seeing trains, because there's trains, and then you're suddenly trying to put something into a smaller world when you're in a bigger world. So Selkirk's a bad example to try to do what I want to do. If I was to take Mojave, yes, I could do it. I could even hold on a second here. Would I do it this way? I was going to say Hudson, but no. Yeah, there's just a lot of different. There's a lot of double track. That's the thing. So for me, Selkirk is a tough one, and it's because you're in a big world and you're trying to represent a smaller world. If I was to go back to, something like either Mojave, even if I was to try something on Bakersfield, for example, the Bakersfield sub. So that's I don't know how many industries there are on it. I never purchased it. At the time, they didn't have the start and end points. I don't think I would get it. I'm not even in a rush to run the program Run8 or well, yeah, obviously I've launched it the last 2 days, but to even get into it, I'm not too sure. But getting a smaller line, the only I was gonna say I would have to go with California and go with Mojave as the likely one, although Bakersfield is possible. Bakersfield's actually not the Bakersfield sub, but actually running the BNSF out of Bakersfield is potentially possible. You could run. I'm just thinking of some of the various ones that you can run into regions. I'm trying to think of the ones that I've had in the past. You can run the UP out of Bakersfield as well. You're really not dealing with much as far as industries. I've always found the Cadiz local boring. Barstow, you're dealing with now you're into the hump. You could, in theory, run the trains out of Barstow, but then you're dealing with the Cadiz local, which is kind of a drag. I don't know what it is about the Cadiz local. It's like, again, I'm not looking to run one train every day. and say, okay, just like a local. What's intriguing about the Model Railroad Club environment is you have a selection of, say, a dozen or so jobs, or a dozen so trains, or different things you can do. So if you're in the mood to relax that night, well, guess what? You run one of the relaxing ones. You do the hump, or you just run a mainline train. If you feel like you've been kind of bored all day, you're up for a challenge, you want to run one of the locals. This happened with the Model Rail Club that I used to belong to. Some days I wanted to run a local. Some days I wanted to dispatch. Some days I wanted to even go so far as be the yardmaster, which is a very tough position, actually. But there was always a choice. I said this the other night. There would be a choice A, a choice B, and sometimes you got outbidded. Somebody beat you to it. Somebody signed their name to it before you got a chance, or they were, that was their number one goal, and they got it, and you just didn't get it in time. But that's the thing. I mean, the region that I was talking about, if ideally I had a region that represented my area, now you're dealing with 3 railroads. And even if you were just dealing with one railroad, there is at least somewhat variation in those jobs. Not so much. I mean, variation in trains, variation in job a little bit. I think they're having movable bridges in version 3. At least that's what I heard. So that's kind of cool. I don't know what kind of movable bridges, but the Welland Canal in St. Catharines certainly would apply to that possibly. But yeah, there's all kinds of different things. I don't know if Scott's still here or not, or if he's sleeping. He's probably gone. Oh, he might be listening in. I better relinquish my my train. But yeah, so I'm just trying to remember of the various things, and this is where the itch type thing comes into play. It's like, okay, this is what I want to do, but is it feasible in Run 8? And I'm not too sure if it is, or I haven't figured it out yet. I think having Trona Railroad representative Mojave was a pretty good attempt. It's just, like I said, for Scott and I, what happened for me anyways, or at least for me personally, was sometimes the server was available and sometimes it wasn't. So I always wanted to have that. If I was available, if I had 2 hours to kill, I wanted it. If I didn't, or timing was off, maybe I'd be in the mood, Scott wasn't, or Scott had something going on, or blah blah blah, or he was in the mood and I didn't have anything going on, so he'd be stuck running things himself. That's kind of what kills it. But if you have something in the background that's actually being able to do the switching for you, I think I actually, now that I think about it, Florida is a good example of another pretty cool operation, to some extent, anyways. But you're typically dealing with one train, but it feeds all those little small yards. That's kind of a fun job. It's both relaxing and has a little bit of work to do. But then again, you're dealing with a little bit of a busier line down there. Actually, sorry, it's a Sanford sub, so it's not too bad. Sanford sub's pretty good. The only thing I didn't like about the Sanford sub was once you got closer into Taft, you're honking the horn like crazy. I thought I was going to break the horn on my rail driver. And you can't dispatch and do that at the same time. You just can't. I mean, trying to pay attention to all the grade crossings. I blew so many crossings trying to go into the dispatch screen and then go back and you really got to become familiar with it, and I'm not very good memory-wise. So, but there's experiments I can try. I haven't really thought of the areas too much. If you guys can think of a few other areas, and I've gone through areas before and tried to think, well, gee, I could try this or I can try that, and like I said though, the prototypical Mojave sub has way too many trains. Now, can I run it less prototypical? Sure, if I wanted to, but like I said, these are big transcontinental main lines. The only one that seemed feasible was the Sanford sub, and that basically has one supply train and a few other trains. There's still a few other trains that have purpose that go into it, so you can. So there is. I actually think the Sanford sub's probably a good candidate to try, and maybe I'll try it and see. And I'm not too sure what. Yeah, those are smaller yards. They're doable, and if I'm not mistaken, because I'm thinking out loud here, the way I had it set up, or at least was trying to set it up, was it was take it or leave it type system. So in other words, what happened was there was tracks in those little sub yards. You would have a place to drop the cars off, and somebody had up to 24 hours to move it, to do this, to the local operation, to run the local. If they didn't run it within 24 hours, it would flip itself over. It would act as an industry. So that was a semi-auto. That was a system within Run8 that I was allowed to take advantage of, as long as the car was set off in a dedicated track. That was something I was trying towards the end with Sanford, so it wasn't too bad. So I mean that's certainly doable. I think Sanford was the closest thing I ever had to a somewhat kind of cool operation. You had all those little intermediate yards, but it was never quite something that I tried to get that was like something that I ideally wanted to see, and that was just maybe one intermediate yard and a bunch of not a bunch of different trains, but a selection of a few different trains. I mean, the club that I used to belong to used to have an intermediate yard that was in the hub, so it had two subdivisions, three, sorry, that ran in the area. Actually, four if you count there was the major transcontinental line, which, for CP, is not nearly as major as the States. So you're talking across Canada, everything is very, very close to the border for the most part. Like once you go where I'm going, or you're starting to get into Booney Land, the further away you get from the border. So yeah, you could just do your meets and do whatever and have some fun with it. You had Sudbury, which basically represented and this is actually where I'm going on my trip. My first stop is going to be Sudbury. So Sudbury was home with the Cart Chase sub that ran. This was the transcontinental for CP, ran this way. It's no longer runs this way. Everything goes to Toronto, but then there's a line that runs to Toronto, the Parry Sound sub for CP, and it also had the Cart Chase sub, but it also had the Webwood sub that went this way towards Sault Ste. Marie. That's another place I'm going to be stopping. So I'm going to go up to this way, Chapleau. You can see where Gagama. We're going to be stopping there. I'm going to stop at Timmins one night. We're headed all the way to Thunder Bay off of Lake Superior for our vacation. So that's the plan right now. Marathon, I think I'm going to be stopping there. ATCS all in this area are going to be following. This is where the CP line runs, Chapleau, Chapleau through Sudbury, whereas the CN line runs through. You can see when I zoom in, there's the CN line right there. It'll run along all these little towns here. That's just a railroad. Ditto with CP. CP runs that way. So everything runs, and then they converge again in Winnipeg. But like I said, you get into boonies. Look at you see major highways. Once you get past up here, you're into tundra, lots of lakes. You're not getting. This is a transcontinental. I mean, you get transcontinentals down here. It's just like, okay, you're interconnected with everything in the States. Whereas Canada, everything is relatively close to the borders. I mean, Edmonton, Calgary is an exception in the prairies, but when you get into Canada, when you get into Ontario, it's a lot different. The network is not as big because there's so much wilderness in this area in comparison to the southern part of the town, where you can see all the grids. You can see all the grids in southern Ontario, where I live. This is the more dense area of the city of Toronto, biggest city in Canada. So, and closest to the States, most southern end. So, yeah. Anyways, there's a nice little geography lesson. But, anyways, I don't know. It's 11 o'clock. I'm gonna call it for the night. But I just wanted to let you guys in on what I'm still thinking. I don't know if I've really said too much or even convinced myself any further. But yeah, I still like trains. I've liked trains since I was a kid. That's not going to change. The question is now, can I get something with Run8? Can I get RTS to work with it the way it would be beneficial or worth putting the effort in? So that's something I'm trying to consider, and I'll have a lot of time on my vacation in a few weeks as well to really think about that and decide if it's worth my time or not. So, but anyways, I think Smiley's gone. I don't know if Scott's still there or not, but last I checked, he wasn't. I think he fell asleep or he's watching the news. So, oops. Maybe I just caught him there at the last second. Anyways, guys, we'll have a good one. And, yeah, I'll keep in touch. Again, you can check out the forums. Feel free to go in and shoot a reply down there if you got any ideas or whatever. Railroad Transportation Simulator.wikia.com is the website. You don't have to be a member. You can post anonymously, do whatever you want. YouTube comments are fine, and I'll let you know what's going on. It's something I'm thinking about, and I've posted about here. So if I come up with any other ideas myself, right now it just seems like I'm the one coming up with ideas these days. So. But it's good to see, that Smiley's got a server going. Scott, he's not that interested in it, but he seems to be killing a little bit of time on it anyway, so that's good. But anyways, I gotta go. So I gotta get to work tomorrow morning. So have a good one. We'll talk to you later.